All right. So
Yeah.
have you ever like tried to picture a country, I don't know, just like so big, it's almost like a continent in itself?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing in today's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be like really getting a handle on India, both its massive size, like how big it is, and its strategic location. And we've got some great educational sources about Indian geography to help us out here. Trust me, you might be surprised by like some of the things we find out. Just to get started, did you know that India is actually like the 7th largest country in the whole world?
Wow.
It covers a huge 2.4% of the Earth's landmass.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is.
And it's not just about the sheer size. It's also about, where India sits on the map. That location is a huge part of like its history and its culture and also like how it fits in with the whole world.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's like zoom in on the map here a little bit. Where exactly is India and why does that matter so much?
Okay, so on a map, you'll find India kind of nestled in both the northern and the eastern hemispheres, which kind of puts it in a pretty unique position, don't you think?
I guess so.
I mean, think about it. That location affects like everything from its climate to its connections with other continents.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. I remember learning about the Tropic of Cancer cutting through India.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that line in the sand, or I guess on the globe, like how does that affect things?
Ah, yes, the Tropic of Cancer.
Yeah.
That imaginary line that circles the Earth at about, 23.5 degrees north of the equator. It basically slices India almost in half, right?
Oh, wow.
And that's why you see such a difference in the weather patterns. South of the Tropic of Cancer, you've got like a tropical climate, right?
Mm-hmm.
While areas north of the line experience more temperate climate.
Oh, so it's like two Indias in one.
Exactly.
When it comes to weather.
It's not just about temperature, though.
Well,
That Tropic of Cancer also influences like the rainfall patterns and vegetation even. It really shapes the landscape and lifestyles of people like all across India.
now this is where it gets, for me anyway, this is where it gets like mind-boggling. India is so vast that it stretches across something like 30 degrees of longitude.
That's huge.
What does that even mean, like for people living across the country? I mean, wouldn't sunrise be happening at like wildly different times depending on where you are?
That's a good question. And you're totally hitting on something crucial here.
Yeah.
That's where the idea of the standard meridian comes into play.
Okay.
Because without it, trying to coordinate anything across India would be, pure chaos, right?
Yeah.
Imagine trying to catch a train in Mumbai, but it leaves at like 3:00 a.m. while the sun is still up.
Oh, yeah.
To avoid that kind of crazy situation, India decided to adopt a standard meridian,
Okay.
which is at 82.5 degrees east longitude.
Okay.
It passes right through Mirzapur in Uttar Pradesh,
Uh-huh.
and that sets the Indian Standard Time, or IST.
So everyone in India set their clocks to the same time, even if, like, the sun might be rising at different times for them, depending on where they are.
Right.
That seems a little counterintuitive, but I guess, I mean, for a country that covers such a huge area, I guess it makes sense.
Right. It's really a practical solution to this kind of complex geographical challenge, right? It keeps everything running smoothly, from train schedules to like how businesses operate, even if it means that some people might feel a little bit out of sync with the sun. I mean, think about this. Chennai in the south sees the sunrise almost 2 hours before Gujarat in the west, yet they're both following the same clock.
Wow.
It's amazing how geography can influence even the simplest parts of like our daily life.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so we've got like location and time zones kind of figured out. So let's talk about the size, like the sheer size of India. We already mentioned it's the 7th largest country globally, but can you give us a sense of scale? Like just how massive are we talking here?
Okay, so hold on tight because we're about to take a giant leap. India's landmass is a mind-blowing 3.28 million square kilometers.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, you could fit almost all of Europe, minus Russia, within its borders.
That's incredible. There's no wonder they call it a subcontinent. But being that big also means you have a lot of neighbors.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
How many are we talking?
A lot. Not just a few. We're talking 7 land-based neighbors.
7. Wow.
Yeah. So you've got Pakistan and Afghanistan to the northwest. Then moving east along that northern border, there's China, Nepal, and Bhutan.
Okay.
Finally, along the eastern side, you'll find Bangladesh and Myanmar.
7 land neighbors. That's a lot to keep track of. And don't we also have to factor in those island nations that are kind of nearby as well?
You're right. We can't forget about Sri Lanka and the Maldives.
Yeah.
They're really crucial maritime neighbors to the south, and their proximity adds another layer of, well, complexity, I guess you could say, to India's geopolitical landscape.
So it's not just about who's next door, but also who's across the water. Why are these maritime neighbors, Sri Lanka and the Maldives, why are they so important? Like, what makes them stand out?
Well, think about it. Their location, that strategic location in the Indian Ocean, it's incredibly significant for India, especially when it comes to maritime security and those all-important trade routes.
Okay, so we're starting to see a bigger picture here, right? India's size and location aren't just about geography. They're also about relationships and security and even like global influence.
Yeah.
But before we go deeper into those aspects, can you give us a quick rundown on some of these neighborly relationships? I'm just curious about the dynamics that are like at play.
Sure. Well, let's start with China. China is actually India's biggest trading partner.
Oh, really?
Which, that highlights their economic interdependence.
Yeah.
But they also have this long and complex history with some ongoing border disputes that, add tension to the mix. It's a very delicate balancing act for sure.
Oh, yeah. This sounds like a very challenging relationship to navigate. What about Pakistan? I mean, that's a border we hear a lot about.
Right. India and Pakistan share a very deeply intertwined history, often turbulent, marked by things like partition and conflict, unfortunately.
Right.
But you know what? They also share vital trade routes and a lot of cultural connections.
Oh, wow.
Which makes their relationship even more intricate, I think.
Wow. It's amazing how geography can create these like complex webs of connection and tension at the same time, right? It's not just about lines on a map. It's about real world relationships.
It is.
What about Nepal and Bhutan? They seem to be like tucked away up in the Himalayas.
Right. Both Nepal and Bhutan are actually landlocked.
Oh, okay.
Which makes them very reliant on India for access to the sea and for trade. This creates a, unique dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Where cooperation is essential for both sides. It's a reminder that geography can really shape a country's foreign policy in big ways.
Like it dictates their options in a way.
In a way, yes.
What about Bangladesh? They share a border and history with India, right?
They do. India and Bangladesh actually share a close bond, rooted in culture and history. They've got strong trade ties, and the presence of a large Bengali population in both countries also really strengthens that connection. It's a relationship where shared culture plays a significant role.
It seems like those ties, like the shared cultural ties, can be a really powerful force for cooperation. Finally, let's talk about Myanmar. What's their relationship with India like?
Myanmar is a very fascinating case, I think,
Okay.
because it serves as India's gateway to Southeast Asia. This makes Myanmar a key player in India's Act East policy, which aims to strengthen economic and strategic ties with the Southeast Asian nations.
Hold on, Act East policy. Can you just remind me what that's about?
Yeah, sure. It's basically India's way of, building stronger relationships with the Southeast Asian countries, right? More trade, more partnerships, more influence in the region. And Myanmar, with its shared border, becomes kind of a crucial link in that strategy.
So it sounds like India is really trying to position itself as a major player in the region and using its location, leveraging its location to its advantage. But before we move on, you mentioned something kind of intriguing about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands during our prep. Those are part of India, right?
They are.
But you said they're actually closer to Indonesia than to mainland India.
They are. That's right. It's one of those geographical facts that really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
You're telling me. These islands are practically on Indonesia's doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean for India's security? Does it create tension? Or does it open up opportunities?
That's a great question. It definitely highlights the strategic complexity, I guess, of India's position. On one hand, it extends India's reach and influence deep into the Indian Ocean, but it also, it raises concerns about maritime security and potential vulnerabilities. It's a balancing act. And the Andaman and Nicobar Islands are a key piece of that puzzle, I think.
Wow, that's mind-boggling. It really underscores how India's location just makes it this crossroads of so many things. Different cultures and economic interests and even security concerns. We've covered so much already, from the Tropic of Cancer and that standard Meridian thing to this whole, network of neighboring countries. And we're just getting started.
We've only scratched the surface.
Really?
Oh, yeah. There's so much more to explore, especially when it comes to the historical significance of India's location for trade and how that plays into its role in the global economy today.
Oh, okay. Well, buckle up, everybody, because this deep dive is about to get even more interesting. We'll be right back after a short break to delve deeper into India's fascinating story.
Sounds good.
We just left off talking about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, like these islands that are technically a part of India but are actually